Nope. Hold on, technical difficulties. There we go. Nope, come on. All right. Good evening, everyone. Why is it not doing that? There we go. All right. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Vic, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. My name is Captain Matt Dow. I was supposed to be here last year presenting to you fine folks. Unfortunately, events came up that didn't allow me to be here, so I'm really honored to be here tonight to present my tale of two Sternwheelers. So thank you very much for having me, and whether it's your first year here or it's your 50th year here, thank you very much for coming out tonight and joining us. So, a tale of two Sternwheelers. It actually, we're going to start on Saturday, September 16th. In the year 1989, so exactly 34 years ago to the day, to the date. That afternoon was a dark and gloomy day. The ride on the Valley Gem was canceled because of the weather, so instead there was an afternoon luncheon planned where my grandfather, Wilbur Dow, presented a side profile of a proposed new boat for New Orleans, for the operation down there. At the time, the vessel was just going to be the New Orleans. It eventually became the city of New Orleans, but camera flash. So here is the drawing that he presented. It was a boat designed by Jack Gilbert. It was going to be 213 feet long by 48 foot wide. Diesel-electric propulsion, having three 3412 Caterpillar diesel engines, providing power as a propulsion and to ship service. We were actually going to go into it with the Brennan family. We were going to do the marine operation side of things, and Brennan's fame in New Orleans was going to do the food and beverage offering. We did get a few quotes from some different shipyards, Levac Shipyard being one of them. The price at that time was $3,205,000, which was a pretty good deal for a boat of that size and caliber. Well, unfortunately, that was a little bit too high for the Brennan family, and they eventually backed out of the deal. So the boat never came to fruition for us, but the design lived on, and in fact, 3 boats were built off of that design. One of them, which is still around operating today, the Bella Cincinnati. So she maintains some of those design features that were supposed to go into our city of New Orleans. So it's nice to know that the design for a beautiful boat did live on. So after that design fell through, we soldiered on through the 90s, through the gaming boat boom and then bust. Thank goodness. There were some plans to renovate the NATCHEZ and actually change her exterior appearance, bring some of the bulkheads out to make her a gaming boat. Luckily, those did not go through and bastardize Captain Alan Bates's beautiful design. So luckily that did not happen, but we went through the 90s, got through the millennium, and the future was looking bright. Things were looking up. We were carrying a great number of passengers every year. Until this date, August 29th, 2005. Now, it was on that day that Hurricane Katrina made landfall just east of the city as a Category 3 storm, although she had reached Category 5 strength in the Gulf. Now, while the storm went to our east, and we technically weren't in that really bad right front quadrant, what it did was the storm surge. It pushed it into Lake Pontchartrain, into the the Mississippi River Gulf outlet, and overwhelmed the flood walls that were in many of our drainage canals. As it came ashore, those flood walls failed and ended up flooding about 80% of the city. It was underwater for several weeks, and then, of course, with the passage of Hurricane Rita 3 weeks later, the city reflooded. So the entirety of New Orleans was underneath water for several weeks. I think we all remember some of those heartbreaking images we saw on the news, and just awful. In fact, here is a satellite image taken 2 days after the storm, and all the areas in blue that you see on that are water. So most of the city was underwater. And it was an awful time. We brought the boats upriver just to get away from the storm. We didn't realize we were going to be gone for over a month and a half. But when we get back to this, okay, sorry about that. We finally did get back in October of that year. We did a couple of things in New Orleans and then ended up going upriver, both in 2005 and 2006 for the tall stacks. But business just wasn't coming back strong enough. And unfortunately, our riverboat, the John James Audubon, had to be sold to interests in New York City to keep the beautiful steamer NATCHEZ running. So for the next roughly 10, 11 years, the NATCHEZ soldiered on by herself as the sole vessel of the New Orleans Steamboat Company. It was in 2016 where our passenger carriage had finally returned to a level where we could look at a second boat. And once again, a food and beverage boat became our thought. We really needed to do something that was more food and beverage oriented. So we did look at a couple different vessels, the Royal Argosy out in Seattle, the Harbor Queen, which was a boat built by Blount Shipyard, and I'm not sure what's happening. Come on. Okay, all right, the Harbor Queen. Sorry for the technical difficulties. And we also looked at the Catfish Bend, which was an old casino boat. But none of these boats quite had what we were looking for, that factor, that it factor. Until July 25th, 2016, when we went to go look at the Casino Rock Island. At this point in time, she had been out of service for a number of years and was moored in a little backwater in Chillicothe, Illinois, Ham's Holiday Harbor, which was not much of a harbor and really none of a holiday. Don't tell Dick Ham that. Hi. So the first impressions of the boat, and that's my dad looking at it as we took our little skiff over there to get on board. First impressions of the vessel, she was in pretty rough shape. She had been out of service, like I said, for a number of years, and she needed a lot of work. That's one of the many bucket boards in the wheel. This is the top deck. Yeah, rough. But the thing is, she did have a calliope. Okay, this was just one. She didn't have a calliope. And we would put one on her later. That's for later in the show. That's a nice picture of the one she did have. It was built by Kim Graham. And if anybody really knows the name Kim Graham, you'll know it's not worth the 5 cents that it probably cost to put that instrument on the boat. But she did have a calliope at one point in time, and what she did have was a lot of promise. She had a lot of character, and you can see in Dad's face, I love this picture because it was very candid. He didn't really like pictures of himself taken, but I got this. He's just kind of looking up in the ceiling, and I could tell he was thinking. I could tell the wheels were just moving in his head of, what this boat could be. And so we decided to go ahead with the purchase of the vessel, and on September 29th, 2016, we began the tow from Chillicothe down to Wood River, Illinois, where we would put her up in a dry dock. So here is the beginning of our tow. This is us pulling away from the Occasion for the first time in, at that point, 9 years. This is us getting pulled out of the harbor by their resident towboat. We were brought out into the river by Ham's Holiday Harbor, and we tied up to Marietta Transportation's Charlie G to begin the 3-day tow down to Wood River. As you can see, they tied us up to an empty there so that they could still have a view ahead of us. As we went down, we said hello to our younger sister, the Spirit of Peoria, now under renovation to be the riverboat capital in a yet as of unnamed location made public. So we're looking forward to seeing both boats out on the river running once again. We also passed the Goldenrod while we were there, and this was shortly before she was destroyed by fire. So I thought it was pretty poignant to get these pictures, just not knowing when I would see the boat again, and I'm happy I did. So we continued down. As you can see, this is how we were tied up so that they could still have a view ahead of the vessel. This is coming through the lock there just above Wood River. And this is Mike's Marine there in Wood River, Illinois. This is us tied up, waiting for the dock to open up, which it did shortly after that. And, oh, it made it through a transition. Yes! Okay, so here is us going into the dry dock. What we thought was going to be a 3-week inspection turned into a 4-month project. So we spent a lot of time looking at this site, and we did some fun things along the way too. Chief Scotty Villegas and I, our port engineer, and myself spent 3 weeks together. Those first 3 weeks were a lot of fun. He's got a great sense of humor for those who do know him. But he had also never been up in the Arch in St. Louis. So Dad said, well, Bubba, you got to take him up in the Arch. Do some fun stuff. Don't just sit in the hotel room doing nothing. I said, okay. So we went up in the Arch. It's a great view from up there. Unfortunately, a not great view was what we saw the following day when we took a trip out to Effingham, Illinois, to see the remains of the steamer President, which is a vessel that we had owned in the 80s, one that was near and dear not only to our hearts, but many people in the New Orleans community still fondly remember the President as the premier nightclub of New Orleans. So these are pictures of her, including her Calliope manifold, which recently was picked up by Mr. Zach Moorcraft, Moorcraft Manufacturing. Yes, claps to him. Thank goodness he saved a piece of history. And this is it in his shop. That's the black colored manifold down to the bottom there. Now the red colored manifold is actually a fun acquisition of mine that he is keeping an eye on for me. That is the manifold of the steamer Washington's Calliope. That was Fate Marable's instrument. And that was on board the boat when Louis Armstrong started on her. American Cruise Lines recently sold that to me, and my plan is to put it back into action. Once we get done with the renovation on the NATCHEZ, we're putting it on the roof and putting her back in operation. So those whistles will sound out over the New Orleans harbor once again for the first time in 100 years. So it's a pretty neat prospect. But these are the two nickel manifolds together, and then Zach's instrument up in the wagon. So also saw the President's keyboard while we were there. That's the original keyboard for that instrument. And they have a nice model of the steamer Admiral there as well, their resident excursion boat for a number of years. Going off on that tangent, we went and took a look at her roof bell, which is still in existence, just a little downriver from the Arch. I got to ring it. It was a pretty neat experience. And I did know that we needed a roof bell for the city, and I knew that they wouldn't part ways with this, but I put some feelers out there, and Captain Bob Harrison of Bel Air, Ohio, answered my call and said, well, I'll give you a roof bell free of charge. Yeah, a very nice offer, especially since he had the Chris Green's bell as well, which I tried to. He said, well, no, I'm going to keep that one for my collection, but I will be happy to give you this one. We're not sure which boat it came off of, but we did put it up there. It's now up on the roof of the city where it rings out over the New Orleans waterfront. So for the next 4 months, I saw this site a lot, flying in and out of St. Louis. A lot of projects were done in the dry dock there, including the removal of several tons of ballast off of the back in the form of these concrete blocks and 13,000 pounds of steel shot that was down in the fantails. As you can see, here is the fantail sans blocks, quite a bit of weight. We also took the 2 bow thrusters that the vessel had, and we made one larger thruster. We took the furthest aft one out and extended made the first tunnel larger and put a new bow thruster in there. That's them putting the collar on there towards the end of our time in Mike's Marine. We also changed the 2 stern thrusters out on either side of the wheel. That's freshly painted, freshly installed. And we had a visitor up there. That was the Queen City Riverboats, the Spirit of Cincinnati. She was on her way to her new home upriver. So a couple nice pictures of her. It was good to see a familiar face there with us. After we got off the dry dock, it was just a waiting game until we could get a tow back downriver. Some nice sunsets while we were waiting. And February 3rd, 2017, we got our tow, and we got the name of the boat officially posted on the side, City of New Orleans. So this was the first time that anybody knew what the name of the boat was. Put the sign on there for the tow down. And it was the XL Marines Winchester, single screw, pretty powerful towboat. Took us down about 5 days to New Orleans. Here's passing the arch that night. That's me at the wheel. Kind of a cute picture. I wasn't doing much of anything, but I thought the picture was nice. Here's the confluence of the Ohio River to the right and the Mississippi to the left. Travis had told me, Travis Vasconcelos, he said, if you take a penny and you toss it into the river at the confluence of the two rivers, make a wish. And I won't tell anybody what my wish was, but it's coming true. Knock on wood. Thank goodness. So we continued down. We finally made it to New Orleans, and we saw our sister ship for the first time. This is the first meeting of the two. They gave a very nice whistle salute to us. And then it was back into the Industrial Canal where we began our renovation. There we go. So first thing first, demolition. We had a lot to take out. Ceilings, wall panels, old insulation, 168 cameras. As you can see, it was pretty rough for those first few months. Another thing we did is we got rid of the skate pipes, which were not real. They were just there for show. Although the decorative tops were cute, and I brought them home in my Toyota Corolla, and I now use them as decorations in my backyard. And there is my dog, Sadie. She made an appearance for the slide, so hi, Sadie. She's being a good little girl, being watched by my friend Annie right now, so be happy to see her in a couple of days. But those are the regular big smokestacks we took off as well because we decided to go back with something different. You'll see that a little later in the slideshow. So we're going to start out with the main deck and work our way up, show you exactly what we did. First and foremost, we changed the layout of the bow because there were no places to tie any lines up, work anything. It was just all done on cables as they pulled up to the side of the Ockerson in the gaming boat days. So we changed the design around. We added the capstan, the H-bit, a bunch of cleats and we added the anchor as well. They had this little tiny anchor that just kind of hung out on the jackstaff, and it wasn't worth much of a damn. So we purchased that anchor and added that there. So the bow was completely changed. We also renovated the bar using some pieces from the old existing bar as well. We'll talk about those a little bit later. This is a nice shot of that main deck dining room when it was new. Unfortunately, it doesn't look quite that clean nowadays, but that's for the next renovation. What we also did was take out all of the count and security rooms in the back of the main deck, and we made it into the galley. So the boat has $1 million full-service galley on board now that provides all of our meals for the lunch, brunch, dinner cruises that we offer in the harbor. We also changed the layout of the fantails and added a rescue boat, and of course painted them with our signature avocado green deck paint. So nice, freshly looking fantails then. We'll move our way up to the boiler deck. We added some very nice pineapple lights up there, a sign of welcome and hospitality in the South, as the entrance to the second deck dining room, which I really like. It's actually my favorite room on the boat. Now, the light fixtures up there, the chandeliers and the sconces, those are original to that deck. We decided to reuse some pieces of the boat, those light fixtures being some of those. So these are with the new globes on them. Provides a very nice touch, and it's a nice story to say, these were here before. Pieces of the old boat still do exist on there. Where the old count room used to be is now our bar, and where the bar used to be, in the back of the second deck there, was sectioned off and turned into a captain's office and our gift shop. You can see two of our gift shop attendants there smiling. It's a very creative use of the space because it's probably not much bigger than that projecting screen right there. But Miss Karen on the right there, gift shop manager, she did a nice job getting the room put together. On the other side, there was a little lounge waiting area, but we turned that into our second deck service area. So that is where the food and beverage comes up from the galley in our dumb waiter. Not brought up by dumb waiters, mind you. It's a dumb waiter. It's an actual device. It's not people. We've got a few of those, unfortunately, but who doesn't, right? Pause for clapping and drink of water. But this is our second deck service area that provides food and beverage service to the second deck dining room. We'll now move upstairs to the... I couldn't figure out a name for this because it was kind of two decks in one, so I'm just calling it Texarkana deck, I guess. It's a little bit of both. Up in the front of the cabin, they had a VIP room, and there was a wall separating the rounded half-moon area from what I'm standing and taking this picture, which is still the bar area. But we took that wall out, and we added some banquet seating up there, so it's actually a pretty nice place to sit and watch the activity of the deck, especially when the band is playing towards the back of the room. We also redid the bar, and of course added some fleur-de-lis because it's New Orleans, right? Why not? And we have a very nice model of the city built by Mr. John Hand, sitting at the back of the third deck cabin. It's funny, I kind of joked around with people. I say, well, the model of the boat got done before the boat got done. So it was nice to show it off. Well, the boat will look like this someday. But there it is now in all its glory, protected. And this was a neat part about that third deck. They had actually added an after room on when she was a gaming boat for extra slot machines, and you can see the mounts for them in the deck back then. But we knew that we not only wanted a walk-around deck on the third deck again, but we also wanted covered outdoor deck space where people can sit underneath covering and enjoy themselves. So what we did is we cut that room out. We brought the roof, the Texarkana roof, I guess, back to its original location of where it was, when the boat first came out. And we added the gingerbread. We kept it running around there, and that is now an outdoor deck space where people can go sit under cover and enjoy the balmy New Orleans summer afternoons while sipping their drink that they get from the bar inside. That's a service area that we added because food and beverage, that's what we're geared towards. So we needed an area where they could bring food up and prepare it before they take it out into the dining room. And that's it, close to completion. Very nice. All right, we'll move up to the top deck. We added wing bridges because before there was nothing that you could really see down the side of the boat to navigate it. They didn't really care much about the navigation, so we added the wing bridges, and you can see our head captain, Captain Nick, out there directing a landing after one of our many propulsion test trips. As I said before, we changed the roof bell out, provided by Captain Bob Harrison. That's a picture of it now. Nice acorn and a plaque that he had us put up there for him, thanking he and his family for such a kind donation, because it's a very kind donation and still rings out over the waterfront to this day. Now, the pilot house was an interesting part of this top deck renovation because you could see how low it used to sit to the deck. In fact, you could actually walk up to the window and just bang on it like a fishbowl. So what we did is we cut it off of the deck and we raised it 4 feet into the air and built these surrounding pieces underneath to protect it, provide a little room underneath the pilot house for propulsion, backup equipment and whatnot. Also for our air tanks for our main whistle, those are down underneath there. As you can see, the whistle also purchased, or I should say it was purchased from Captain Bob because we didn't want to leave there without doing something for him. So we purchased the whistle from him out of his collection. It's not quite sure where it came from, but it's a very pretty tone, and we're lucky to have it. We added the name boards because what self-respecting steamboat does not have name boards on its pilot house? So, the tiny set of antlers there was an inside joke with Dad. He said that every boat needed a pair of antlers, and I said, well, this boat couldn't win a race with its own shadow. So I put those up there as a joke, but we did get a real pair of antlers later on that he purchased and sent down. So Dad wanted antlers, he got antlers. We also added a canopy over the back of that top deck because those who know New Orleans know how hot it can get in the summertime, and if you were up there with no covering, you wouldn't be up there long. And we added a bar. It's New Orleans, right? Go figure. Add a bar in the back. It also protects the elevator shaft, the top of the elevator shaft there, and it kind of hides it from view, so it makes it look like it actually belongs up there instead of just being an eyesore out on the deck. In the back is our calliope, and it's the instrument that came off the P.A. Denny. It was built by Frisbee Engine and Machine Company in 1975 and 76. We purchased the instrument from Captain Heckert in 2014, but not for the boat. This was before the boat came around. We had actually bought it to put it on a truck in Lake George, New York, where the parent operation is. And Dad wanted a parade truck to take around in different parades and celebrations. But the instrument was way too big for that. It barely fit on the bed. And also to power the motor, to power the blower, we would have needed a separate trailer with its own generator. So we decided that a smaller instrument would go on the truck, which it is to this day, smaller air calliope. And we decided to put the Frisbee Calliope down on the city. So the two Frisbee sisters are back together in New Orleans. And soon its sister on the NATCHEZ will be live again for the enjoyment of all those passing by. We needed a lot of work done on it, and you can see Travis Vasconcelos on the right and James Hall on the left doing some rewiring work on it. And they did a lot of work, not only on the electronic side of it, but also on the tuning side. Our chief engineer, Scott Viegas, made some fixes on the whistles there. Here's all of us after getting the instrument up there and tuned properly. We've got James, you've got our friend Anthony Benedetto, Captain Anthony Benedetto of Lake George, Travis and myself, and it's playing to this day, does pretty well. Now the smokestacks, I mentioned before that we took the old ones off to change them out. A fun story about these smokestacks, 4 vessels are represented in these stacks, and it's actually the 4 vessels that made this boat what it is today. So first and foremost, you have the design of the Belle of Louisville. Those who know our family's operation know that many of our original crew came from the Belle in 1975. Captain Hawley, Captain Steve Nicholin, Captain Steve Villier, Bobby Hine came later. He was our first mate for a long time. But we've always had a good relationship with the Belle, and I wanted to represent them in the stack. So the overall layout of the stack is reminiscent of the Belle of Louisville, as is the fleur-de-lis in the spreader bar. Our boat up in Lake George, as a mini, has the 2 stack crown puddings, the 2 kind of triangular pieces below the actual crowns themselves. And so on the city's crowns, there are 2 puddings on each side. We use the design of the feathers from the NATCHEZ and also the stars in the spreader bar represented in our spreader bar. And finally, the scroll work from the original spreader bar on the Casino Rock Island, the design of that is used in our spreader bar. So the 4 boats that made the city of New Orleans what it is today are now represented in our smokestacks. So the next time you're in New Orleans and take a ride and people ask about that, oh, those look so pretty, now you know why they look the way they look. As I said before, we used a lot of elements of the old boat in the new boat. The history and the preservation of history is something my family has always been very adamant about. So we didn't reuse. We reused the design of the tops of the stanchions and the railing pieces there. We had them cut with a high-pressure water jet out of metal, using the design of the old railing pieces, all 1,806 of them. I got bored in the shipyard one day and counted them twice to make sure. This is us bolting the new pieces to the railing, and you can see the finished product. It looked just as good as the old ones did originally, and a lot less maintenance required. We also reused the top design pieces on the windows. We had those redone and painted and replaced all the shutters just to keep the boat looking somewhat like what it did when it was a casino boat. We kept the nosing around the top deck and above the pilot house as well. It's all that, and that was original to the boat. That didn't get put on there because we said, oh, New Orleans fleur-de-lis. That came with the boat. The Jumer family wanted the boat to look as much of a riverboat as possible and look as New Orleans-y as possible. So it's appropriate that she ended up in New Orleans. As I said before, we reused some of the decorative pieces from the old bar cabinets. This is the one that was on the main deck, those pieces there. And we had just enough to outline the main deck bar with them. But there was a lot of really nice decorative woodwork on board the boat, including these etched glass holders up at the front of the main deck that have really nice etched glass pieces of the casino boat there. We reused those. Those are still on board to this day. And we reused the steering wheel that steered the boat when she was a casino. We went to a different design for the pilot house with actual steering levers versus a steering wheel. But I didn't want to just junk that steering wheel because it was too nice to get rid of. So we use that as a decorative piece downstairs. And people love taking pictures in front of it. We kept Gentleman Jim. He's back by the galley now, presiding over the dining room and the buffet. We kept a lot of the wooden doors on board the boat, as well as the brass pulls, nice and shined up. So those are original to the boat and still on board to this day. And now the something new part of the something old, something new is the name boards, because of course we didn't keep the name. So here's a shot of the stern name board and the side name boards, freshly after they were installed. They sure beat the canvas things that were on the side that I zip-tied to the railing in February of 2017. So the really nice local artist who did these, and should be commended on his work. He did a fantastic job with them. We also added the name to the front, and we did not do the shading. I know Capt Holly was not terribly happy with that, but we did put the name back on front, and we said, well, when we do the NATCHEZ, we'll be sure to do the shading, but that'll come later in the presentation. Now, this renovation was not without its challenges, and first and foremost were hurricanes. Yes, we have hurricane season, and yes, we had to deal with a couple of them. The first one, we actually had to get towed out because we had no propulsion. The boat was basically a ghost ship. That's how it looked, and we had to stay on board it during Hurricane Nate, which luckily went to our east and didn't give us much weather, but this was how the boat looked, and we barely had any power, and we had to sleep on air mattresses, and it was a lot of fun. The next storm that we had to come out for was under our own power, and we had air conditioning, thank God. But the worst by far was Hurricane Ida, and that was a Category 4, almost Category 5 storm that went to our west, so we were in that right front quadrant. It was a pretty intense storm. And this is the NATCHEZ. She was mid-renovation at that point in time, and if you look closely, you'll actually see a hole in the side of the bulkhead there because the boiler had just been changed out. But we hadn't put the bulkhead back on the boiler. But we told the Coast Guard, either you let us out of here under our own power, or we stay in the canal, so you pick. So they wanted us out, and we got out, and that was one hell of a 3-day period leading up to the storm, trying to get those two boats out of the canal and get them to safety. But it was challenging, and there are a lot of folks in this room who have dealt with this group before. USCG, Uncle Sam's Confused Group. And this was my K regulations book with all my earmarks and post-it notes of if our head inspector, Tom Alho, had a question about something, I could go right to the page and say, oh, we've talked about this already. Here's the reg. I found it. Let us keep moving on with this project. But by far the biggest challenge with this boat was its propulsion. It was an old system that was designed by Norm Rittenhouse, and it was first put into effect on the Spirit of Peoria, and he used it on the Casino Rock Island as well in kind of a different layout than they had on the Spirit. And while it was great for pool water applications, it has proven not to be the best for running on the lower, especially in high water. But now we did do a lot with the propulsion system, including new drive control units and moving them back into a different space other than the engine room, which was very hostile and dirty and not too good for things that needed clean running conditions. All these electronics are very sensitive to dirt and dust, and they wouldn't be good in the engine room. So we moved them back into one of the crew holds. We also stripped all 3 engines apart and rebuilt them. There's the generator going back on. I think that was engine number 3. That was the first one that we did. We went backwards in order, go figure. We also took the 2 electric motors out from the fantail and had them sent out to be refinished and cleaned and put back into the fantails, I should say, reinstalled. And we rebuilt the entire paddle wheel because, as you remember from the earlier picture, it needed some work. It was in pretty rough shape. So we rebuilt the whole wheel, brought the buckets out a little bit for some better digging ability to really get some good torque on some propulsion. And then once we got everything in order, we did a lot of running in the canal to try to test everything, work all the kinks out. We kept having an issue not being able to get quite the speed out of the boat that we had wanted. So we took dozens of trips up and down the industrial canal trying to figure everything out. We finally made it out into the river when we did figure out what the issue was, and this is her rolling about 18 and a half RPMs on the wheel. She was flying around then, probably nowhere close to the speed that the NATCHEZ can attain with the same number of RPMs, but she might be able to win a race against her own shadow with that kind of speed. So on September 18th of 2020, through the COVID and all the different issues that we had, we finally got the boat running. The COI was signed as the boarding concert was being played on the Calliope. It was down to the wire that we got this boat running. But once the boat got running, we could finally focus on Big Sis. So now the second part of this is the renovation of the steamer NATCHEZ, which if I had $1 for every time somebody asked me how the renovation of the boat was going, I'd have enough money to pay for the renovation again. So we brought the NATCHEZ back into the canal on January 28th, 2021, and immediately began work. She needed a ton of steel work. This is the bulkhead of the Texas deck where it meets. Oh, yes, and it goes all the way back to damn near the gift shop. There was a lot of rotted steel. In fact, when they were doing this, a tool, I think, went down through and into the dining room. A pretty big hammer. Someone went to swing it and lost a hold of it, and boom, it went crashing down to the next deck. So she needed some tender love and care. That's in the old Texas bar. That's where the bar used to be, and you can see how much steel needed to be replaced in just the bar there. We also replaced one of the boilers. This is Louise coming out, and this is her sitting on the dock next to her replacement, built by Seattle Boiler Works of Seattle, Washington. It's a 600 horsepower boiler, not the 800 horsepower that we took out, but 600 horsepower we've been told is more than enough to do what we've got to do, including steamboat races in the future. So that's it going in. Here is the team of Villegas and Villegas. You've got Villegas Sr. on the right, and his son, who is now chief engineer of the boat, Scotty Villegas Jr. on the left there, working some of the controls for the boiler as it, fires up, yay, making steam. All right. Moving on, we started on the roof and worked our way down, and we stripped all of the decks down to bare metal and coated and primed and painted them after checking to make sure that there were no leaks in the roof as well, something also very important. The boat is looking good. So from the top down, this is the gift shop. We actually changed the location of the gift shop and the Texas bar. We swapped the two rooms. So the gift shop's now in the front where the Texas bar used to be, and the Texas bar is in the back where the gift shop used to be, which was also President Ford's room when he and his wife rode the boat down in '76. So that's a pretty neat fact as well. So here's the new gift shop, and here is the Texas bar. Now still works in progress, but this is how the spaces look now, and hopefully when I get back down Monday, they'll look even better. They were going to do some more work on them over the weekend. Also on the docket was a complete renovation of the dining room, new ceilings, new walls, new light fixtures as well. Many will remember the old chandeliers were about as wide as the skylight trunk there. These chandeliers are a bit smaller, but they're pretty nice. And I think those fans of the boat will still be fans of these as well. They don't take too much away from the view that folks know and love. One thing that did not change about the dining room was Captain Hawley's name. board at the back of the dining room. We said, if you save one thing in this entire room, it has to be that. We do not want that going in the trash. That's too precious, and especially now that we don't have Cap with us, it's even more precious. So they did a wonderful job putting old ceiling tiles back into the existing, well, I should say into the new structure of the ceiling, and it's lit up today. They did a very nice job with it. Things were going along smoothly. We were planning to be out in the summer of 2022 until May 3rd of that year. It was about 8:45 that night that I got a series of phone calls from our head captain saying there's been a fire on board the boat. And when I asked how serious it was, he said, well, the generator room is gone. And I had to pause and say, gone? What do you mean gone? He said, it's gone. That is a news image that appeared on our local news station, taken from across the canal. That was the generator room before the fire. Oh, yeah. And that was it after. It was pretty serious. It caused about $2 million worth of damage, including our brand new Caterpillar generator that we had just put in earlier that week. Had to be totally rebuilt. The damage was, as I said, significant. Here's just a couple of pictures of the morning after. The smell of hydrocarbons was burned into my nose for about a week and a half. And we couldn't clean up anything because of the investigation. We had to keep everything in place. I mean, it went on for 2 or 3 weeks. Finally, they cleared the scene, and we were allowed to start doing some work again. This is part of the cleanup. This is when we were able to take what was left of that bulkhead out. We had to re-insulate the entire engine room as well because of the extent of the smoke damage. So this is a picture of the overhead of the engine room today. All new insulation, Coast Guard approved as per per regulations, but it looks nice, and it is up to A60 standard once again, so our inspector is happy. We did a lot of bulkhead work because the heat had buckled them in and out so much. And we also got the one generator completely rebuilt and purchased a second one because the existing Cummins generator had been completely destroyed. So we have 2 new generators. We have a new switchboard now. Each generator is 565 kW, which should be plenty to power everything on that boat and everything food and beverage wants to throw at us in the future. Our last big hurdle was the dry dock, and we thought it was only going to be a 60-day period. It turned into more of 6 months. Here is the boat when she first got up on the dock. She had a lot of barnacles and growth from 2 years in brackish water that had to be scraped. We also had the opportunity to replace both of the sewer tanks with stainless steel, as Scotty absolutely goes by. He said, don't put anything on there unless it's stainless. It won't rust, and you'll never have to look at it again. So he swears by it. So that's a picture of the one sewage tank going in on the starboard side. We also put a new bow thruster in. There it is going in down at the existing tunnel, getting tied in. There was a lot of steel work that had to be done down there after 48 years of going. But most of the hull has been now replaced. And should be good for another 50 years, if not more. We also blasted the entire hull and gave it a new coating of paint, so it looks nice and fresh. Of course, we had to put Captain Hawley's bow name boards back on there, and our Captain C.J. Lardner, who has become a very capable sign painter in his own right, learning under the master, of course, painted them back up there. We also replaced the pilot house name boards. And here's a nice picture of our senior captain, Captain Steve Nicholin, and his son, Captain Stephen Nicholin, not a junior-senior situation. They have different middle names, and that needs to be said because Captain Stephen Nicholin and Captain C.J. Lardner have been appointed as master and alternate master of the steamer NATCHEZ. So when she comes back into operation, that will be your new operating team on board the boat. Very proud to have worked with them all these years, starting out as a deckhand with them, working our way up to where we are now, and I'm proud to put that team on there. They love the boat. Their work ethic is incredible. They came up under Captain Hawley and Captain Steve Nicholin, so we're in good hands with them. And so making it official, that's your new operating team on board the NATCHEZ now. We finally got back into the water on, I think this was June 30th, after 6 months on the dock. And on July 7th, we were towed back down where we tied up at Toulouse Street Wharf for the first time in 2 years. And so a lot of work has been done on the boat since we got back. We got a chance to paint the main deck finally and get it looking good. We also polished the calliope whistles, so we're getting close. Yay! We have also changed the signs down below following the renovation. The old ones were damaged or destroyed, and we did add boiler room signs finally, so people know where the boiler room is, because before you'd walk right by it and you had no idea that you walked by the boiler room. So now folks will know where the boiler room is. We of course had to replace the display, since we redid the bar, of our steamboat race trophies. So we decided to bring them out from behind the bar and put them in the middle of the dining room where they can be adored by the public. We left space for more. So we're open to any challengers. As I said, we left space for more. And we tested out the new boiler. That day, the fuel ratio wasn't quite what it needed to be. And we got a picture from this person in Jack's Brewery saying, "Oh my God, has there been another fire?" We said, no, this is okay. This is just a boiler. But God, does it? When someone showed me this picture in the office, you go, "Oh, is everything okay?" I go, "Wow, that's a beautiful picture." "Well, no, but is everything okay?" "Oh, yeah, everything's fine. Don't worry, it's just a boiler." But that's a gorgeous picture that I wanted to put in this presentation because she looked really old-timey in that shot. So we're getting close. As I've told a few people here, we've just received our last approval letter that we needed from Washington for our test procedures of the emergency switchboard, or excuse me, the main switchboard, the 2 generators and the boiler. So when I get back, we have a meeting with our inspector on Tuesday to discuss scheduling over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll get the boat running. So what comes next? Well, it's a neat question. I've told a few people this, but I recently purchased the calliope from the steamer Washington. I think we said that earlier in the presentation, but here's a nice picture of it with the whistles on. We're going to put it on the roof, and we're going to pipe it into steam, and we're going to play it. So that's one fun thing that's going to be on board at some point in time when we can get the manifold down from Peru and get the whistles back on it. But in terms of the overall operation, what is going to happen next? Well, we're going to play to their strengths. I mean, the NATCHEZ was designed as an excursion boat. She wasn't designed to be a dinner boat. That's why she's got those great outside decks, just sweeping massive amounts of deck space. And we're going to use the city as our food and beverage boat. We shouldn't have to rob Peter to pay Paul, and it's something that I cannot stress enough to the sales team. They want the city to do what the NATCHEZ does, and they want the NATCHEZ to do what the city does. And I say, why? Especially if you've got 2 boats. Let them do their thing. So I'm going to work hard on letting them do their thing while always keeping history in the forefront of my mind. As I said before, preserving history and sharing that with, thousands and thousands of passengers, millions maybe, has always been at the forefront of what my family wants to do. And that's what we will continue to do, is preserve history and share it. That's where we are as of September 16th, 2023, 34 years after this story started. Now, it's been a tough year. I did want to make a couple of different Well, I just want to do a couple of, not shout-outs because that sounds wrong, but there's a few people that I'd like to make mention of. First and foremost, Keith Norrington, who was the curator of the Howard Steamboat Museum for a number of years, with the museum for decades of his life, and a very dear friend of mine. I called him Uncle Keith, and that was a story that came from my first trip on the Spirit of Peoria, where Miss Judy Patch was my grandmother, since I was the youngest person on that boat. I mean, Barb and Joanne and Carol can attest to that. But Judy became my Grandma Judy, and when Keith heard the story, he said, well, I'm old enough to be your uncle. So he became my Uncle Keith, and he was my Uncle Keith till the end. Another strong influence in my life, somebody that was a strong influence in all of our lives, Captain Clark Doc Hawley, a phenomenal riverman, calliope player, and friend and family to us all, really. And finally, the person who, the last time I stood at this podium, I introduced, and somebody who I wouldn't be here without, is my father. And I couldn't be here last year because he had just passed away. And I remember sitting in his room working on this presentation while he was in the bed, and I said, I'm not trying to ignore you, Dad, but I need to work on this. And he goes, oh no, that's important. He said, I'm so proud of you for being asked to be a speaker at the S&D talk. He said, your grandfather did it, and I did it, and I'm so proud of you. So I know you're paying attention to me. You just keep an eye on me, but work on this presentation. It's important. So here's the presentation. And thank you. Thank you. And I just want to say, in conclusion, it's been a long, long time. And there's been a lot of water behind this wheel. And I couldn't be here without the folks that have flashed before you on the screen, and without all of y'all supporting me and being there for me. So I just want to say, thanks, y'all. And, are there any questions from the audience?
How's the renovation going?
Add $1 to my renovation bank fund. Thank you. It's going well. Watch out. I'm going to put this on the boat now. This will be in the trophy case. I won this fair and square, so thank you. Again, the renovation is going well. When I get back to New Orleans, I'm going to get with the Coast Guard inspector, and I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks we can get something worked out. There's a government shutdown looming for the end of September, and if that happens, then well, it's going to last a little bit longer, even more longer than we'd planned. But we're working our tails off down there, and we want to get that wheel rolling and those flags flying and that calliope playing, the whistle blowing as much as anybody else does. And it's not so much for us and for those in this room, but I mean the boat itself is a symbol of New Orleans, and it's known worldwide. And it's not just a tourist trap. I know people hear that, but I think one of the best stories that I have ever heard was from folks after Katrina in the city, and they said, well, we didn't quite know what was going to happen. The city flooded, and nothing was coming back, and industry was gone, and tourists were gone, and they said, but when we heard the calliope for the first time in October when you came back down, they said, we heard the calliope and we realized then that everything was going to be okay. So getting this boat back out is so much more important than just for jobs and for revenue. It's a symbol. And I think when the calliope starts playing again, the feelings, some of the feelings that were felt when she came back after the storm are going to be felt now. It's going to be, oh, there's the calliope. She's back. Things are going to be okay. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
How much asbestos do you have to take out of two boats when you got into the refurbishment?
We didn't have any. It had been taken out in previous. It had been taken out in previous renovations. Yes, sir. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, what? I'm sorry.
I think it's also the symbol of the American pioneer spirit.
Amen. Hear, hear. Thank you.
You said the NATCHEZ is 40 years old.
48 years old. 48. 48. Yeah. Yes, sir, Cap.
And the engines for the NATCHEZ came off the Claret.
Claritin, yes, sir. They're 50 years older than the boat. And,
Belleville's engines are older than that.
oh, yeah. And I'll tell you what, after Ida, we hadn't rolled the wheel in over a year. And when we had to get out for Ida, it was quick, and we weren't getting towed out. The tow companies called and said, oh, we can't get you, we're busy with it. So we said, well, crap, we're going to have to get out of here under our own power. So it was a year since the wheel had rolled, since the boiler, but I tell you what, she knew she had work to do, and we greased everything up, oiled everything, and those engines just came right back to life like they had been running the day before. I mean, there's something to say about steam power for its cleanliness, one, but its longevity, the more important factor. I mean, they just, when you need them to go, they go. And those engines knew they needed to go, so they went. We're very lucky to have those wonderful towboat engines on board the boat. And when we, like I said, when we needed them the most, they stepped up to the challenge. All right, thanks, y'all.